everyone. My name is Carolyn Schubring. Thanks so much for being here this morning. I'm a composer. I've only taken 1 year of saxophone lessons, and that was just because I wanted to learn about how wind instruments work. And so you know a lot more about your instrument than I do, but I've just found a lot of joy in writing for the saxophone. I love this community, so it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I'm going to keep writing saxophone music for a while, just so you know.
Hey, that qualifies you. You're a sax player.
Great. Yeah, so you're very welcome. You're like, yeah, you can come on in. But yeah, I'm a pianist primarily, so that's more of where I'm coming from. But I know that a lot of you, I feel inspired by saxophonists because you're so hungry for music. Like whenever I'm talking to saxophonists, it's like, oh, I'm arranging this, I'm arranging this, I'm arranging that. And I think that's amazing. But I've also had some conversations where, someone's telling me about this exciting arrangement project that they're working on, and they're like, oh, but I'm not a composer. Like, oh, no, I'm not a composition major. Or, there's just this like disqualifying statement that immediately comes out of their mouth. And I'm like, well, why not? You're like clearly being creative musically. And so I just started getting curious about, hey, what might be holding you back? If composing is something that you're interested in, today I just want to share with you some ideas, maybe some self-limiting beliefs you might have about composing that's just keeping you from taking that extra step. So I titled this presentation, Taking the Leap from A to C, because A stands for arranger, C stands for composer, and usually we talk about going from point A to point B, but sometimes, right, going from A to C feels like, oh, it's so far away, like, how do I become a composer? Like, I know how to do this thing over here really well, but what's the gap? How do I get across this chasm? When am I a composer? How would I even start doing that? So I hope that this presentation can answer some of those questions for you, or at least open up a conversation. I'm a big believer of just email me anytime, and I will get on a Zoom call with you, and we can just chat about what your goals are, and I'm happy to be a resource to you. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to talk about what strengths you already have as an arranger. We'll talk about some myths you might be believing about composing that might be holding you back, because I'm honestly a big believer that a lot of it is a mental block. And then we'll talk about the missing pieces of building that bridge across the chasm, the 3 steps of generating material, ordering it, and then evaluating it. I believe that that's really the only 3 steps that are missing from you being a composer of your own original music. So we'll break that down. Okay, so we're gonna review your resume. Raise your hand if you've written an arrangement before. Amazing, this is so exciting. Okay, so I don't even know your names, but if you've written an arrangement, this is what I can tell about you. You have a healthy musical diet. If you are making arrangements, you're listening to music that's not just the saxophone. You're not just like only in your practice room thinking about what you're playing. You're listening to other stuff, and you're thinking about, ooh, hey, that would sound really cool on my instrument. That tells me that you're hungry for inspiration, that you're looking to other sources of music and letting them inspire you. And you're probably familiar with several genres of music. If you're arranging choral music, you're probably listening to choir music, right? If you're arranging a violin solo for soprano, you've been listening to violin stuff. And all composers need to have a healthy musical diet, because our voice, we'll get into this a little bit later, but we're pretty much just the summary of all of the things that we're ingesting musically. So if you're already having a wide musical palette, that's going to be a huge benefit to your composition. If you've ever arranged something, you probably have some ability to internally hear or imagine, right? Something in your brain said, ooh, you know what? This would sound really good on my instrument. So maybe you couldn't exactly hear every single note or every single passage, but something in your brain clicked and was able to imagine something that didn't exist yet. And that's something that all composers have is, hey, it's just this fuzzy idea of, I bet that this thing could exist someday, and we're willing to step towards it. already experienced with creative decision making and making variations. How many of you, when you made your arrangement, you had to make some critical decisions? You had to change it up a little bit to make it fit, right? Yeah, so that's just part of the ball game of arranging. Every instrument has its limitations, so you've already had to do some creative problem solving to make it fit. Composers have to do with that all the time too. Sometimes, you know, I have an idea in my head of what's gonna work, and then I get into the rehearsal room, and it's just a dumpster fire. Like, it's just not gonna work. And so I have to make a creative decision on the fly of, okay, I thought this would work, but it doesn't, so how are we gonna address that? So as arrangers, if you've already been working through those hoops, you already have this skill. I bet all of you in this room are experienced performers, or you're trying to get there. You're actively seeking out more performance opportunities. That's a huge asset. Honestly, I wish that more composers were performers, because there can be this disconnect of, you know, if you spend all of your time on your notation software all the time, you just think that everyone's a perfect robot, and then you show up to the rehearsal and you're like, oh my gosh, you have to breathe and turn pages? What? But yeah, like if you're gigging, if you're with people, if you're playing all the time, you have just this knowing of what it takes to make music that even, you know, composition majors don't really have that full grasp on. So I believe you have a huge advantage as a performer. And maybe you're already in a group. Maybe you're in a saxophone quartet and you're rehearsing every week. That's an amazing advantage, because if you're writing a saxophone quartet, guess what? You could just pull out your piece for the last 5 minutes of your rehearsal. Hey guys, can we just look at this really quick? Boom, that's a huge asset. You're already familiar with your instrument's sensibilities. You've probably encountered orchestration decisions of like, hey, actually, you know, this instrument sounds a certain way in this register, and this blend works here, and you know, you've just encountered these things with your arrangements already, that you're just learning things boots on the ground that you didn't necessarily have to learn in the textbook, right? So that true experience is a huge advantage. And you're probably familiar with notation software. So raise your hand if you're a MuseScore user. Okay, who's Sibelius? Any Finale still? Oh, God bless you. Okay, and how about Dorico? All right, my quick plug is I started on Finale. I moved to Sibelius for college. I switched to Dorico a couple of years ago. It's actually the best. Okay. It's the end of a lot of headaches. And it will make your music look professional without you trying. That's my unsponsored sponsorship. I'm done now. Talk to me if you have questions. Okay. So we just talked about all the qualifications you have. I would argue you're already more qualified than some of the composition majors I went to school with. But I bet there's still this voice in your head that's saying, oh, but I'm not a composer, right? So how do we address this? I wish I had a citation for this, but this is one of those telephone things. I heard it from a friend who read it in the book somewhere, that there was this study that was done on runners, and they found that of the people they surveyed, some of the people would call themselves a runner, and some people would not call themselves a runner. But what they found in this study is that there was a higher percentage of people who actually ran more times a week if they identified as a runner than people who did not identify as a runner. They would just not run as frequently. And so what I believe this study points to is this idea that identity creates action. A lot of times we're waiting for ourselves to do something. Oh, once I do this enough, or once I accomplish this, then that makes me this thing. But a lot of times it actually works the other way. If I'm just going to choose this identity for myself, it will actually produce the habits and the lifestyle that I want to see in my life. I don't have a lot of memories about first grade, but I do have one, and it was sitting on the floor in a circle and learning about the ending ER, okay? We were talking about like swimmer, drummer, saxophoner. And those two little letters means one who. So swimmer is one who swims. Drummer is one who plays the drums, right? It's a very simple little thing, but suddenly when we put it after the word compose, it's like, oh my gosh, are you a composer? It has like all of this weight behind it. My argument here is you're a composer if you are somebody who composes music. It's that simple. It's not if you have a degree in it. It's not if you won a Grammy. It's not if your piece got performed at NASA or not. It's, are you, like, what are you doing on a Saturday morning? What are you doing for fun? Are you writing music? Okay, great, you're a composer. That's all that matters. It doesn't have to have all of this hoity-toity stuff attached to it. Are you somebody who composes music? So, what myths might you be believing that's keeping you from forming that habit of writing music? This is one I hear a lot. Oh yeah, I've tried writing music, but my ideas just aren't that original. The like music major, composition major version of this is, I don't know what my compositional voice is yet, right? We dress it up. People tend to like worry about, oh, what's my voice? What am I saying? What's going to be my artistic impact? I firmly believe we really don't have to spend time stressing about this, because every single person's brain in this room is different. We were all at, like, who went to the concert Thursday night? Okay, so we all heard these fabulous concerti, but I can guarantee we all walked away with something different from that music. We all heard the same music, we were all in the same room experiencing the same thing, but our brains noticed different things about those performances, and we all walked away with something different. Now multiply that by, you know, what's all of our Spotify playlists like? What are all the teachers you've ever worked with? What's like a core memory you have from the first grade? Like we have so many summations of different experiences that we're bringing to the table, and we're all ingesting different kinds of music and movies and books all the time, that what's gonna come out of you is just going to be different than what comes out of me. We could be given the same exact like motive, like, oh, write a variation on Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, right? A very specific prompt, but we're gonna come up with something totally different from each other, just because of our experiences, the things we're listening to, the things we like, it's completely different. So I would wager to you and propose that no matter, like, your ideas are just gonna be original, because you are original and you are unique. The thing that we have control over is our musical palette. What are we ingesting? So I'd argue everything is actually a remix, right? Like sorry to say, but I did not invent musical notation or the 12-tone system, or, you know, like, I'm working with all of these materials that have been given to me. So by nature, everything that I'm gonna be creating as a composer is just a remix of what someone else has done. But remixes are really exciting, and we're all gonna remix things differently. So while maybe I don't have control over making something completely new, there are composers out there who are doing completely new original things, and that's awesome. But what I do have control over is, what am I listening to? What am I eating? What am I going, like, what movies am I seeing? What books am I reading? What poetry am I reading? That's the stuff I have control over. So if I'm making music that I feel is kind of boring, or it's like, you know, I've kind of heard this before. This isn't exciting to me. What that's actually telling me is maybe it's time to go to a concert that I've never gone to before. Maybe it's time for me to ask my friends for what they're listening to on Spotify. Maybe it's time for me to go to the movies. Like, what I have control over is what influences I'm letting myself be influenced by. So if you are stressing about not sounding original enough, I would encourage you to look at, you know, your musical plate. Like, what's on it right now? Are there vegetables? Are there potatoes? Are there meat? Like, and how can you diversify that plate? So I like to use this analogy of seek out new kinds of cuisine, right? If I'm a French chef and I specialize in pastries, I'm sure that as a chef I'll still grow if I go get Thai food once in a while and I learn about, you know, what's going on there. Yeah, we're all just making a fusion restaurant of all the music that we've heard before, okay? So if you want new flavors, go seek them out. Go learn from something else. Another belief or self-limiting thought you might have is just, I never know where to start. How many of you have stared at a blank page and felt kind of overwhelmed by it? Yeah, that's a huge barrier to entry, right? It's like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna make something out of nothing? What I would encourage you on this one is that inspiration can be really tiny. We look at this big blank page and it can feel impossible to put something on there. But one of my favorite pieces I've ever composed, it just started from 3 notes, and that was it. And it grew into a piece. I would also encourage you that inspiration does not have to be musical only. You don't have to like keep searching for musical ideas. Maybe that's kind of a dead end for you. Sometimes it can be more helpful to start with a non-musical inspiration. So, let's see if I can give you an example. Like, I wanted to write a solo piano piece in college. It had been a while since I'd written a solo piano piece. And I felt kind of overwhelmed by it because, you know, there's a bajillion solo piano pieces and it's like, what am I going to say that's different or, you know. So I started with kind of this non-musical idea, or rather than coming up with melodies and stuff, I thought, oh, what if I wrote a little etude and each one had to fit inside of 1 octave on the piano. And so that was the inspiration, is just, I'm gonna set some parameters for myself and see where it goes from there. So what is pre-composition? I would say it's anything that is not actually you sitting down at your composing method of choice, whether it's handwriting or software or playing on your horn. Pre-composition can be going for a walk outside. It can be getting coffee with a friend. It can be reading poetry. It can be drawing. It can be going to a comedy show or binging that Netflix show everyone's been talking about, right? Like anything where you are just getting yourself inspired, giving your brain space to think and just be creative and just let your subconscious kind of simmer in the background. This can all count as composing and getting inspiration. So it doesn't always have to be like, I'm sitting down at the desk and I need an idea right now. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and just let your brain do its thing in the background. Showers, right? I don't know why, but the ideas just come in the shower. And I think it's because we're not trying so hard. We're just letting our brains, you know, filter through everything that day and then something emerges. So don't be afraid to back away from the blank page if you need and just go let yourself be inspired by other things too. Okay, here's another one. My ideas aren't good enough, right? We love comparing ourselves. We're probably all friends with composers on Facebook and they're posting like, oh yeah, my piece got played at Carnegie Hall last week and this was the recording. And it's like, great, go you. But then it makes it harder when you're trying to just write your very first composition, right? So all of us have what I would call an inner guard dog. How many of you seen the movie Inside Out? Yes. Right? So it's kind of like disgust, right? Her job is, I'm going to make sure we're dressed amazingly so nobody makes fun of us. So I would call that kind of your inner guard dog. There's this part of you that's trying to self-protect. And guard dogs can be really helpful, right? They can keep out all of the bad neighbors, the sketchy people that come into your neighborhood. So they can be a valuable asset, but they can also, you know, if your guard dog is going crazy when you're having a friend over for dinner, that's not, that the guard dog isn't serving its purpose, right? You need the guard dog to be calm when there are trusted people around, and you need it to go crazy when there's not trusted people around. So if you are struggling with this belief of my ideas aren't good enough, I think that just means you need to put your guard dog on the leash or go put it in the crate for a while, okay? What's happening is it's hyperacting. It's asking like, oh my gosh, you know, you write like one note on the paper. It's like, it's not good enough. We can't do this. It's trying to self-protect of like, oh, this is too vulnerable. Oh my goodness, what are people gonna think about this? And you know, there's a place, again, the guard dog can be useful, but it needs to be used at the proper time and place. So you are the owner of your guard dog. You have power over the thoughts that you let into your mind when you're creating. So a healthy part of developing a healthy composing process is learning when it's time to let the guard dog out and do its thing. But for a lot of the initial idea generating process, it needs to be put away. You need to just dismiss all of those thoughts that come up, and they can feel very real, they can feel very scary, but you just say, not right now. I'll deal with you later. Just procrastinate. Okay? You're not helpful right now. Go away. Your treat's over there. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how do you actually go about composing. So I built a little bridge, right? We're going to generate ideas, we're going to order them, evaluate them, and then boom, you're a composer. Hooray. Okay. So number one, generating ideas. This is like the main thing that's separating you as an arranger from a composer. Is just you're comfortable manipulating someone else's ideas, but you just haven't come up with your own original musical idea yet. And it's actually very easy to do. But one of the things that holds us back is we think, oh, I just have to be inspired suddenly, and then I will be a great composer. You know, I just need my like Beethoven moment of whatever, like waking up in the middle of the night and, oh my gosh, I know what my next symphony is going to be. And so we have all of this romance around inspiration, right? Of like, oh, I just need to be inspired and then I'll do it. Or it's just not coming to me. I haven't had the right shower yet. You know, the idea just hasn't come. So a lot of time is honestly wasted because we're waiting for inspiration because we believe it's this thing that just happens and we have no control over it. But I want to encourage you today that inspiration is not actually a sudden revelation. It's not a sudden burst of motivation, and it's not a mysterious, uncontrollable force. You actually have, and something that you have control over. It's something that that doesn't have to feel elusive anymore. So what is inspiration? I would say it's meaning. We're making meaning out of life all the time, right? Like, I'm walking down the street and I see a flower I like, and I pick it up and I smell it and I say, I want to write a piece about this. Well, now I'm making meaning out of this flower, right? And maybe I'm starting to think about, oh, like this represents springtime, this represents new beginnings, this represents, you know, I'm about to graduate and this is important to me. Like, we just start attaching, you know, and it's just a flower, like, or, you know, it's 3 notes. Like, it doesn't mean anything until you decide that it has meaning to you, right? We're making meaning all of the time, right? When we're listening to each other perform, we're thinking, oh, you know, your playing reminded me of this time my grandma had me over for dinner and just the warm feeling I had, right? That's meaning making. We're taking something that, you know, it's a saxophone performance, and you just made meaning out of it by relating it to a memory that you had. So inspiration can be extra musical, kind of like I was talking about before, or musical in nature. Maybe you're inspired by a little passage you came up with while you were warming up, or maybe you're inspired by your most recent vacation, and you want to write about the mountains that you saw, or something like that. It doesn't matter where you start. Just start somewhere, whatever is feeling meaningful to you. And it's very important in the early stages of composing to set clear parameters for what the piece is going to be and what it's not going to be, right? Like, it actually, so as a professional composer, I'm thinking about this all the time. If someone comes to me and says, I want to commission you to write a piece, like, your chances like, hey, I want to commission you to write a piece, he's probably not going to ask me for a symphony, right? Like, he's just, I don't know, maybe you have an orchestra in your backyard that you've just been dying to bring out. But he's probably going to ask me for an alto solo or something with piano. Or so we're, like, in the very early stages of working together, we are setting parameters for what the piece is going to be. We're probably going to talk about how long it should be, or if it should be virtuosic in nature, or if it should be lyrical. Or, but we're just setting all of these things up at the beginning because there are so many things that the piece of music could be that it's just not going to be, right? It's not going to be a film score. It's not going to be a symphony. It's not going to be a jazz combo. So you get to choose, without writing a single note on the paper, what you want the music to be. Do you want it to be a concerto for yourself, or do you want it to be a 1-minute etude because you hate scales and you want to make them more fun? So this is something that you didn't even pull out the music paper yet. You're just literally making a list of, this is what I want this to do, this is what I want it to sound like, this is how long I want it to be, this is the instrumentation. Simple as that. So I would pull this under the umbrella of the step called ideation, where we're just formulating all of our ideas about what we want the composition to be and what we want it to do. So again, giving specific prompts to yourself. Is anyone here bilingual? Okay, what do you speak?
Spanish.
Okay, say something in Spanish.
¿Cómo estás?
Cool. So did you notice how he kind of like paused a little bit, like, say something in Spanish? Oh, okay, like, that's kind of what we do to ourselves when we're trying to write music. Like, okay, write some music.
Say something.
Yeah, say, you know. What if I said, can you please tell me how I would say in Spanish, where's the nearest restaurant? How would you say that? Sorry to put you.
No. ¿Dónde está el restaurante de cerca?
Beautiful. So he was able to just generate a response so much quicker because I gave him a specific prompt. Or if you've ever used ChatGPT, right? It really benefits from specific prompts. Your brain is the same way. If you're just telling your brain, okay, make something, do it. It's just gonna be like, what do you want me to do? But if you tell your brain, can you please come up with something slow in 3/4 and F major that makes me feel like my grandma's soup? Okay, now your brain is gonna respond to that because it's a very specific prompt. So I highly recommend making yourself like an elevator pitch or a mashup formula. Something, once you enter the world of composing, everyone's gonna ask you, what are you working on? Like, what's your project? And you have to just be able to say, oh, I'm writing this and it's about this. So just write your elevator pitch really early on, right? My piece will sound like if Shostakovich was arguing violently with Bach. Like, oh, I want to know what that sounds like. Or, you know, taking inspiration from a stream of flowing water. My piece will combine a Billie Eilish chord progression with Debussy-inspired accompaniment textures, right? Okay, now I have an idea of what the realm of that composition is, and I haven't written a single note of it yet. But you see how we're channeling our brain? We're taking the creative energy that's there, and we're just giving it a very specific prompt so that it can start filling in the blanks. Okay, so then the next part of generating ideas, after you've got clear ideas of what you want the music to do, is let yourself improvise. You know, maybe you're not necessarily like an improvisatory player, but there has to be some step of you throwing the spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. So maybe your tool of choice is singing, or maybe it's, you know, writing into a DAW, or maybe it's writing straight into notation software and playing it back. But whatever it is for you, just let yourself have a free-flowing part of your process where you're responding to those mental prompts and you're translating it into music. So the tool that is the app I use the most on my phone is the Voice Memos app. Okay, I have like 300 unnamed recordings, and that's not including the named recordings that I have. Okay, I'm just constantly pressing record, and now I have students, so I'm always pressing record for them too, and so it's a mess. If someone, maybe I'll hire one of you to clean my phone someday, but yeah.
I've been tapping notes on here, but would you feel comfortable giving us like if I sent you an email, the slides for this?
Oh yeah,
so I
of
can
course.
just look at it at my own pace?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, actually, so I'm gonna have a QR code later in the presentation, so I'll just dump the slides onto that webpage for you guys if you wanna access it later. Yeah, that's a great idea, thank you. As you're improvising, I highly recommend keeping them short and specific. So if you're doing the phone recording method, and your prompt for yourself is, okay, I wanna come up with this lyrical F major melody in 3/4, then give yourself 30 seconds and that's it, right? Or 10 seconds, or just keep it really, really short and just idea. Sometimes if we hey, there's a place for, I'm just gonna get in the practice room and I'm gonna play for an hour and I don't care who's listening and I need to just get all this out. great, do that. That's a really important part of the process, and I love that part of the process. But once you're starting to really translate, okay, I need to get ideas onto paper, just keep it controlled. Okay, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. And you're just assembling material for yourself. And I highly recommend, if you're making recordings on your phone, to just give it a title, like whatever immediately comes to your mind. I'm trying to think of if I can remember any of my, sometimes my recordings will just be like, rhythmic fun time, or like, or like swoopy gesture, or polka dot music, or like whatever, just whatever silly words come to your head, just title the recording right away so that you have it as a reference to come back to, of like, because you might be 5 weeks later and you're like, oh, what did I do with polka dot idea? That would be perfect right here, and you can go find it really easily. Okay, so we've talked about ideating, improvising, and then the last part of generating is sketching. So that means getting the idea out of your head, off the phone, and onto some sort of, whatever your preferred deliverable format is, if that's handwriting, if that's putting it into a doc, that's notation software. I would encourage you that whatever ideas you come up with, just write it down. I've lost a lot of time as a composer because I wasn't willing to just let myself write my ideas down. We talked about the guard dog earlier. I was letting my guard dog have a heyday of like, oh, you can't write that down, that's not good enough. You can't write that down, that's not good enough. And I just missed out on a lot of time where I could have just been going about my business, writing music, and I didn't even let myself write it down because I was like afraid of if it was good or not. So I recommend just sketching right away. I call it like giving honor to your creativity, right? Just honor your brain for what it came up with. Hey, you know what, brain? I'm gonna write that idea down, even if it doesn't end up in the next piece, because you know what? You came up with that, and that's awesome, and you're great. So I'm just gonna write down an idea, because who knows? Maybe I'll use it, and maybe I won't, and that's okay. By just writing everything down, it stops becoming this like super stressful thing of like, oh, is this good enough to be in my piece? And it's just another idea, right? How many sketches do you think Van Gogh made? Like probably just a million more than the paintings we have, right? Like artists are constantly just sketching and getting a general gist of what something could be. A lot of it doesn't make it into the final product, but it's still just as important that sketching was part of the process. If you are kind of new to music notation, here's some intermediary steps for you. Be able to perform your idea in such a way that you remember it and you could play it with a metronome. Because if you're able to solidify it and be comfortable with your little idea enough to play it with a metronome, that means it's definitely able to be dictated. So even if you don't have the chops yet of writing down music, you could totally take it to a friend and say, hey, can you help me write this down? Or we live in an age where software is a thing, and you could literally like play it with a metronome on GarageBand, and it'll show up with a score for you, and you can see, oh, this is what that rhythm looks like, or whatever. So that's really the intermediary step. If you're not comfortable writing music yet, just make sure that you can play your idea in a consistent format, and then I promise it can be translated to handwriting. But really what matters with sketching is that it's just a format that you understand. You're just making a quick reference sheet of all of your ideas so that you can go back quickly and remember what you did. So even like titling your recordings is a way of doing that, but just having like a tiny little scrap of music paper, and this is my idea that's 5 notes long. Well, now it's a lot easier for you to reference than to just kind of try to remember all of it or to look through your phone later. And same thing with recordings, I recommend you title your sketches too. Like what does this mean? What does this mean? So the goal of when we're generating is we're letting ourselves dump out all the Lego bricks. How many of you play with Lego as a kid, or maybe you still do? No shame. We have Lego hanging up in our kitchen. We have like 3 Lego Star Wars ships that come in. I love my husband. Have that. But you know what? They're really cool. But if you've ever tried to make something out of Lego like freeform, usually you kind of are dealing with like a bin of Legos or like a box of them, or you're usually giving yourself options of what you want to pick with. A lot of times when we're writing music, it's like we go to the shelf and we pull out, you know, the red 2x4 brick, and we go over here, we put it there, and we look at it, and we're like, interesting. I wonder what that could be. It's kind of a cool brick. It's not that good. I should just put it away, right? But the idea of generating is you take the whole box off the shelf and you dump it out, and then you say, oh, hey, this red one goes with this green one. That could be cool. And oh, there's a wheel. I bet I could make a car out of it, right? Like you're just giving yourself a ton of pieces to work with so you can start actually seeing how they could fit together. If you're only letting yourself work linearly, which I did this in my composing for a long time, of just like, okay, I have to know exactly what's next. Even if it takes me 5 hours to know the next note, I just gotta do it. And it's really like working one brick at a time. And it's really slow. But if you just let yourself come up with a bunch of ideas at once, lay them all out there, write them all down, record them all, now you have material to play with. And it's gonna be a lot easier to connect the dots. And again, it might be messy. It might not be a nice linear composition. But this is why in our notation software, you can add literally like 1,000 measures, and you could just drop your ideas at random places. Or, you know, I write on manuscript paper that's literally this big because I love just writing a bunch of ideas on one piece of paper, and I love it that it's messy and, you know, you make it make sense later. Okay, so that was all about generating ideas. So now, assuming that you have this nice list of ideas to work with, now it's time to start ordering them. So that would be, you know, putting our Lego bricks together. So one way that we create order out of our ideas is through the tool of variation. Man, my QR code didn't load. Okay, we'll get to that later. But as composers, we just have to be aware of all the tools that we have to change. So what are all the possible things you could change about this little idea, this little sketch that you just came up with? Make a list of them. So what are some musical elements we can change? Just shout them out.
Key.
Rhythm, key.
Chords.
Chords.
Register.
Register.
Instrumentation.
Instrumentation.
Side.
Speed, tempo, right? So we have so much control over sound. It's incredible. So just make a list of all of the things you could change about that idea. Okay, what would happen if I put this idea up an octave? What would happen if I flip the notes upside down? What would happen if I put them backwards like Bach would do, right? Just make a list of all these possible variations and transformations you could do. And you'll be amazed how even if you start with 3 notes, suddenly you have like 16 ideas out of one idea, just by trying different variations. And that's not even going into the combination of variations, right? Like, it gets overwhelming really quickly, but it's very exciting. So again, I encourage you to give names to your variations, because then you're making meaning of your music as you're going. So, you know, if I have this 3-note idea, and then I decide to put accents on it and put it on the lowest register of the saxophone, maybe I would name that like hippopotamus or something. Or if I want it to be really high on the piano, I use the word sparkly a lot. Like, oh, this one is sparkly, or this one is whatever. Like, just writing words of, okay, this is what this variation is like. This is what this one is like. So then you're starting to make meaning of all of the different variations you're generating. And again, I just want to stress that this is a very non-linear process. So it's okay if you're not starting at the beginning and going to the end. Really, you're just picking up a brick, seeing what fits with it, setting it aside, pick up another brick, see what fits with it, put it down. And I promise it will all come together. But just let yourself be playful in the sandbox. Okay, this is what my QR code links to, but I'll make sure to get it to you guys. I made this little card deck. It's just printable and you can cut it out, but it's a variation card game. And it's just really fun because, I don't know, if you love games, I love games, you can just pull up a card and like see what it does to your idea, right? So this one says reharmonize. Okay, what happens if I reharmonize? And I put like a busy accompaniment underneath it, or, you know, fun little cards for you guys if you want to literally make your composing a game, because it should feel that way, honestly. Okay, so after we've made our ideas and we've started to make a bunch of variations of those ideas, now we actually have enough material where we can start building a piece out of that. So notice we spent a lot of time just getting a lot of stuff into the, like, having a sandbox for ourselves, and only now do we really start hanging things where they go. So I made this little illustration just to show that really writing music is really just piece by piece. So you just start with a little pattern. Again, it could literally be 3 notes, or maybe even less. Okay, you find a pattern, and then, okay, what would be a complementary pattern to that pattern? You know, something that could go next to it or underneath it. Okay, well, once we stitch a couple patterns together, now we have a phrase. And how many phrases do we need until it feels like we have a section, right? So it really is just inch by inch, piece by piece, and if you've already generated all this material, then you probably already have a lot of patterns, and you probably already have some phrases that have emerged, and now you're just kind of assembling them next to each other. Okay, so we've talked about generating ideas, how to bring order to them, and now we're going to talk about evaluating. This can be a lot of what shuts people down. Even composition majors I've seen just suffer internally because they don't know how to manage their guard dog yet. So I'd encourage you, yes, evaluating your work is a part of the creative process, and it's something that we all need to do to make good work and to make better work. But there is a time and a place for it. So I encourage you, if you're going to procrastinate on any part of your creative process, procrastinate evaluating, okay? You're allowed to procrastinate, but the thing you should procrastinate is evaluating your ideas. Push it off as far back as you can possibly manage. You want your free associating creative playtime to be playtime, right? When you were playing as a kid with your toys, nobody like walked in there and was like, "You're playing wrong, like how dare you?" That story doesn't make any sense. No, you were just playing and having a great time, and it's so good for your brain. So let your music writing process be that. Let it be play, just like when you were a kid. And then when the time comes, when you have a good amount of phrase groups generated, when you have maybe a section, when you have something that's coherent enough to show to a friend, okay, now it's time to evaluate. So how do you train your guard dog? I recommend scheduling an appointment. Okay, so like decide when you're going to evaluate your music. You know, when you sit down, okay, I'm composing right now. Is right now an evaluating moment, or is it a creating moment? You know, okay, Friday night, before I have to leave for this concert, I'm gonna spend 20 minutes listening to my MIDI file, and I'm gonna write down the thoughts that I have that just come to me. But you see how that's a lot more of like, it gives some healthy distance. It's not like, oh, I'm a failure, oh my gosh, this isn't any good, because and honestly, set a start time and an end time. Seriously, set an end time for how long you're gonna evaluate your music for, because you don't wanna spiral and just tear it up, right? Just give yourself, okay, I'm gonna listen to this piece 2 times, and I'm gonna write down my thoughts, and then I'm gonna put it away, okay? That's a healthy evaluation boundary. Or I'm gonna set up this time with my friend for them to listen to, and I'm gonna hear their feedback. That's a healthy evaluation boundary. And here are some questions that you can ask yourself instead of, is this good? Ugh, I hate that question. It's so non-specific and not helpful. When you're making arrangements, right, when did you decide it was good enough? Well, probably you finished arranging the piece, so you're like, great, it's complete, that's a checkbox. Is it playable? Great. Does it, sound kind of like the original? Great. So there were some parameters that you could kind of go down the line, check, okay, I think this arrangement works. But when it's your own original piece, it can feel a little bit more nebulous of like, oh my gosh, is this actually good enough or not? So here's some specific questions you can ask. 1, is it playable? That also includes, are there page turns, okay? Does it capture the initial inspiration? I love this question because now you have a specific thing, right? If we are going back to, I want this piece of music to sound like the flower that I picked the other day. Okay, well now there's a specific point of reference. Does this music sound like the flower? Well, actually I don't think it does because it just gets to forte really quickly and that doesn't remind me of the flower. Oh, okay, so it's a dynamic choice. So we can fix that really easily, right? Or it doesn't remind me of the flower because just the harmony feels too dark. Oh, well great, we can change the chord progression. That's a super easy fix. But you see how having that specific point of reference, now we have specific feedback. We're becoming a helpful teacher to ourselves. And we're not just like, it's bad. It's bad, it's not good. Okay, well what do you do with that? That's not helpful for anyone. Is it clearly making a choice? Who is bothered by the dynamic mezzo piano? I'm bothered by it. I still write it sometimes because sometimes you just need something in the middle, but sometimes our music just doesn't pop because we're not clearly committing to a choice. So one way that maybe your music is falling flat for you is you're just not committing to a choice hard enough. So what if you really leaned into it? What would happen? And again, we talked about scheduling an appointment with a friend. So does a trusted listener pick up on your initial intent? Maybe you don't tell them what you were inspired by, you see what comes to their mind, and it doesn't match up with what you were thinking when you were writing the piece. Have a discussion about that. Hey, why does it line up? Why does it not line up? Is what they're thinking about your music a really interesting addition to what you were thinking? So you see how these questions are much more specific and addressable than, is this good? So that's part of training our guard dog, is learning how to be specific about feedback. Okay, now we're gonna talk about something that's very challenging. You guys are all busy performers, students, professionals. So finding time to compose can be a huge barrier. It can really be the difference between are you a composer or not. You know, it's really just are you finding time to do it. So a couple points just to encourage you here. Composing is more than just writing notes down, right? We talked about pre-composition, letting yourself be inspired. So it's okay to embrace that a lot of your process won't necessarily be sitting at the computer, sitting in front of your notebook, and that's okay. So just embrace that composing is a lot more than just writing notes down. And how many of you know that sometimes the best thing for your practicing is to get out of the practice room, right? Sometimes it's like, walk away. This is not helpful anymore, right? So sometimes we lose time in our composing because we're just like trying to bang our head against the wall and make ourselves do something when actually the most productive, efficient thing would have been to just walk away and take a shower or do something else or talk to a friend. So ironically, finding time to compose can sometimes be not spending time composing. Also encourage you that focus time is so much more valuable than multitasking time, okay? So even if you just give yourself 10 minutes to compose, I promise you'll get more done than if you were just like kind of gonna try to do it while doing something else. Also encourage you that a life pattern is more powerful than a plethora of time spent. I still have romantic ideas of what composing should look like. I'm just gonna wake up on a Saturday with my cup of tea and wander to the piano and the sun's gonna be pouring in and I'll just spend 5 hours pouring my heart out and have this beautiful symphony. Or, you know, I'm just gonna do what Mahler did and go away into the country for a summer and walk away with a beautiful symphony number 9 or what, you know, like we have this idea of, oh, you know, to compose you have to be able to retreat and if someone has to bring you dinner and like, that's the only way it's gonna happen. You have to have these huge blocks of time. But if you actually take some of my suggestions to heart where you are setting specific prompts for yourself, you can actually compose in 10 minutes at a time. You actually can. Like if you just have time between classes and you go find a practice room and your brain, like you give yourself the prompt, okay, I need to come up with a 3/4 lyrical melody in F major. You can do that in 5 minutes, right? You could come up with 5 melodies in 5 minutes, boom. Wow, you just got a lot done. You just generated a bunch of material. Or your task could be, okay, I'm gonna take this material that I've generated and I'm gonna come up with 4 possible ways to arrange these patterns together. Boom, you can get that done in 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So a lot of the times we think we need all of this time to compose because we just haven't told ourselves what the task is. And so a lot of that time is honestly burnt with your brain being like, so what are we doing? Like, I don't know, I'm staring at a wall. Like, what do you want me to do? If we go in with a game plan of this is what we're gonna do today, you can get a lot done in a short amount of time. Also encourage you that deadlines can be lifelines given reasonable expectations. So deadlines can be a help to you, especially if you're prone to perfectionism of like, oh, it's not done yet, it's not done yet, it's not done yet, please don't look at it yet. Deadlines can be really helpful for you to just say, okay, it's done. I'm not touching it anymore. Sometimes we just need to get it out there and then we can fix the next piece and make the next piece better. So, you know, if you have a project, if you have a performance date, a recital date, little like tangible life events where it's like, hey, actually this piece of music needs to be completed by this time. Or you could even use competition deadlines as your own deadline of like, hey, I wanna enter this quartet composition competition, so I'm gonna make my deadline a month before this competition deadline. So that can just be there to help you keep up with the practice that you wanna have in your life. So find ways, back to the life pattern, it's more important that you just have a time in your schedule of like, I'm just gonna compose for 20 minutes on, you know, every day at my lunch break. That will get you way farther in your composing life than, oh, someday I'll do this. Someday I'll have 3 hours to compose. If you're serious about, I wanna make composing part of my life, then set an appointment in your calendar and just commit to a small chunk of time. Make it a habit and you'll have all of this momentum that will get you towards your goal. You'll be amazed at how quickly you can actually accomplish it if it just becomes a pattern in your life. All right, and my last thing is you can take the leap with other, like this is a whole room of people who want to compose music. So I'm hoping to, again, my QR code didn't load, but I have business cards. So I'm gonna host this event this summer for a week. We'll just do an hour-long Zoom class every day. And this is designed for you, and I did a presentation yesterday for teachers who want to start composing. So this is just designed so you have a community, you have accountability, there's an appointment in your calendar to learn about composing and just commit. We're gonna have little challenges that we'll do every single day. And so this is just, I wanted to make it for you so that you could just actually start doing what you've been dreaming of doing as a composer. So unfortunately my thing isn't loading, but I do have business cards that you can take and it's the same exact QR code. And I'll post the slides there later, so grab a business card on your way out if you would like to sign up for it. Again, it's completely non-committal. It's just you're letting me know you're interested and I can email you more about it as the months progress. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
When you're talking about procrastinating your evaluation, how, in your experience at least, how advisable or inadvisable is it to, because I often, well, sometimes it's just because I procrastinate, period, but I often procrastinate the evaluation to even farther back when I actually get it in front of live musicians for the first time. I mean, there was I'm thinking of a clarinet oboe trio I wrote recently that I was so nervous about it. Like I was like that, the guard guy, this is awful. Like, I hope they don't hate me. Yeah. So I brought it to their first rehearsal, and the first thought I had was, oh man, live musicians sound way better than Bailey's instrument. Which is duh, right?
Yeah.
But that was my actual thought in my head. You know, I was so relieved. But I've also had other moments too, bringing in a big band sharp, where I was like, ew, okay, I'll fix that.
Yeah.
You know, after they read it. So what would you say about that? Is it
when is it time to put it in front of people?
We're right. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So I would say as soon as you have a deliverable. So I recently wrote a reed quintet, and I had this question of, oh man, I don't know the best way. I have all these chords going on, and I don't know the best way to voice them. So what I actually did is I made a separate document where it was just all these chords voiced like a bunch of different ways. And that's what I showed them, is I just got into the room and this was my question, and we literally just read chord, 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 chord.
Huh.
And so it didn't really sound like a piece of music, but it answered my questions. So maybe once you know you have a specific articulated question, or once you know you have enough notated that they could conceivably play it for 20 minutes and it wouldn't be like, oh, all this stuff is missing. Like if you have a fully orchestrated thing, or even just a melody that you want to hear with different instruments, you get to kind of decide how much material is enough to have a productive rehearsal session. But I think it's less about how many details are done, and it's more about like, is this enough material to have a productive time spent with these musicians and learn something? Do I have questions yet that are specific? That's when I would say it's time where being with other people could be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do you still write music and let the performers make decisions? I have a habit of overwriting instructions or adding too many expression markings or too many dynamics. How do you balance that where you're still getting your point across but without like saying play it like this?
Yeah. You kind of just find your line the more you do it, honestly. And I feel like as a performer, you kind of learn what irks you. So like pay attention, what's the music that you're playing that you're like peeved underneath of like how many dynamics there are? Like which composers are like you bothered by because it's like, why did you write so much stuff? It's like, you don't even trust me. And which composers are you like, dude, why didn't you tell me what to do? This is like, we're wasting so much rehearsal time because nobody can decide what dynamic to play. So it's really this balancing act, and honestly, there are different composers. Like, there's the Augusta Reed Thomason. She's hyper specific. Like, she knows exactly what she wants, and people respect her for that. And then you also have Bach, who was just like, yeah, just do it. Like, you can figure it out.
Here.
So, yeah, that's gonna be part of your composer personality, and you'll learn what's helpful the more that you're in rehearsals with real people, and you're kind of perceiving like who's ticked off a little bit, and who's like, you just feel it out, and as a performer what you feel comfortable with. One of my teachers, what he said is, if you know the answer to the question, put it on the paper, which is super helpful, especially the larger ensemble you're working with, because every single question is literally dollars down the drain. So, especially the larger ensemble you're working with, I recommend being more specific so that there's less questions. So if you already know the answer, you should communicate it. But if you don't know the answer and you're open to other things, then you don't have to pretend that you have an opinion.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's all our time, but feel free to find me if you have any more questions. And yeah, thank you guys so much for being here.